Hello, Changemaker.
Welcome to the Innovation Room.
A place for business leaders,
Change agents and change champions.
anyone who wants to know where digital transformation is taking us,
A place that sparks ideas.
and explores what's really possible with software and technology.
Ready?
Let's see what's happening.
When is the right time to engage with AI? How to make your team and your customers ready for what's coming? How to deal with customers that are resistant to change? How to think big, but act responsibly. My guest today lives and breathes technology. He is a geek at heart and an optimist by nature. He's a change maker on a mission to transform the property conveyancing landscape through the power of digitized data. His passion for technology goes beyond the surface. He's been instrumental in integrating AI into the PropTech sector long before ChatGPT became the most popular AI application. A founding member of the UK PropTech Association and now a part of its board, he is leading the charge in promoting a symbiotic relationship between tech and real estate. Today, he stands as a beacon of progress, illuminating the path towards a tech-driven future in property transactions. In the past 10 years, I've had the pleasure of closely seeing his exemplary leadership in liminal spaces of AI implementation, constantly and consistently bringing clarity, promoting growth mindset, creating psychological safety, and fostering collaboration. He's a true multiplier. I am Somayeh, CEO of Geeks. Please join me in the Innovation Room to hear from Andrew Lloyd, Managing Director of Search Acumen. Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me in the Innovation Room, and very welcome back. It's been a while. I thought we would have you sooner, but happy to have you now.
Hi, thanks, Somayeh. Good to be back. Good to be talking about innovation again.
So as a tradition, Andrew, for the guests in the Innovation Room, we always ask them who would they want to bring into an innovation room doing some innovation projects, like who would you want to collaborate with and create something exciting, dead or alive, fiction or real. And it can be more than one person if you want to bring more than one.
I think there are some sci-fi writers that I would quite like to sit down with and say, and people like James Cameron and directors, and you go, when you were making Blade Runner, how did you know what the world was going to look like and be so damn close all the time? And you see it repeated often in a sci-fi. I always refer to the Minority Report as the one for me, right? That technology, not the bit where you can predict the future and what's going to happen, but when they've got the technology that just sits in the background of the film, right? The world where the cars are driving themselves and you've got the swipe screens where people are moving things around, and you just think all of that stuff. There's people who are able to create concepts based on their understanding of physics and technology in the future, but put it into a real world setting. That would, some of those conversations would be amazing, because they must have some thoughts about what's next that you just would blow your mind when they're writing, when they're dreaming up their next sci-fi. Definitely.
Brilliant. And for people who are listening and not watching the video, if you knew what's behind Andrew, these conversations has a lot of context. So he's a big fan of Star Wars, and he's a big gamer as well.
Yeah, no surprise when you think about my interest in technology. My first ever ZX Spectrum, when I didn't get it for doing my homework, I got it to play a game on.
Do you want to do quick background about what you do and Search Acumen, and maybe give you the context of the AI, because that's the angle we want to discuss in this episode.
Okay, so sure, we are a software business essentially that specialises in providing access to information to property lawyers. And that information largely relates to the due diligence level, quality of data that they require when they're undertaking transactions for both commercial real estate or for standard residential buying and selling. And a lot of data exchanges hands between the parties to ensure things like liability and risk are managed effectively. And so they come to third-party providers like ourselves to access that data. And what we've done over the years is build more and more innovative tools and services to give people, in the first instance, an online shop rather than sending requests out by post and to local authorities, to a one-stop shop solution, and then more and more getting hold of the data that sits behind these reports and providing it in new and interesting ways that law firms and solicitors can consume to enhance their customers' experiences of data. So it's quite an interesting industry in the sense that whilst your objective might seem to be, well, let's cut the time of the process down, actually it's to make the process be more effective while people will go through the choice of moving home, or the companies will do the choice of doing a commercial deal. It's going to take as long as it takes, right? That's
Bring it to the 21st century, the process that has been very...
Exactly. Everything that sits around the process can be automated, but at the end of the day, people have to make decisions. People have to go through the negotiation process or whatever, get their own funding organised, and that's what takes the time. In the truth of it, yes, you can shave minutes here, or you can be more efficient there, but at the end of the day, you've got people involved, and that's always going to be the prime controller.
Great. So one of the reasons I ask you to join me in this series, the Shapeshifters, is your background in dealing with technology and the way you have changed your business over the years and led it through different times and different technology advancements. We've worked together for the past 10, 11 years. I've seen firsthand how you have led through different times and your decision makings and technology evaluation. So I think that's the very, very interesting angle that I thought would be great for the audience and for listeners to see firsthand, or hear firsthand from a change maker who kind of, I'm toying to use the word of who is married to technology, who knows how to engage with technology in a very intimate way. So why don't you tell us how many technology advancements have you seen in the past 20 years of doing what you do?
Wow, I guess there's the obvious key big ones, right? There's the move to from being a purely analogical world to the beginning the digital journey of just being exposed to email. Gone are the days where, as a consulting engineer, I was able to say reports in the post, right? They would say, first of all, it was, can you fax it to me, and then it is, can you send it to me on the email? And so that first sort of shift, and then as that built over the sort of the 90s, you started to get access to the burgeoning internet and the early 2000s, and that I think was a real paradigm shift, in the sense that it created I think the way they've described it is it removed the sort of the gap. There was no longer a distance gap between people who wanted to do business together, people who wanted to communicate, wanted to exchange information. Suddenly you were able to do it electronically rather than face to face. And whilst that took a decade to bed in towards the end of sort of 2010 times, it led to the end of a lot of businesses who didn't want to change, and the beginning of a lot of businesses who fully embraced what the internet could bring. And then I would start to say in the last decade, it's been, there's been a number of things around the Internet of Things and the ability to suddenly become mobile with your connection to data, and the burgeoning 4 and 5G networks, and suddenly you've got the internet in your pocket rather than just having I remember having AOL dial-up when I was first sort of looking on the internet, and moving towards that, and suddenly the interconnectivity that both the advent of wireless and the advent of the internet could bring, and then mobile devices. And then finally, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, you're starting to see more and more strands being built out of that with smarter technology, the potential that you're going to see from things like blockchain and where that can go. Obviously, the increasingly complex ability to write code using the generic term artificial intelligence
Mm.
and the ability to automate things that previously you'd never have considered being possible to automate, and building all of those things together. Suddenly you've got a fully digital world potentially, and that's really happened in the space of 20 years. I would say from 2000 to now. That's a significant difference, and you can see that difference in the people that predate that era.
And you have not, I would slightly challenge that. You have not, like the way I have come to know you, I never felt that you're trying to stay relevant. I've known you to want to push the boundaries and to want to change the way the industry operates. So an example, you started talking to me about implementing AI within your industry for I don't know, 5 years ago maybe. And then having invested in it when not a lot of businesses were taking it seriously. And we've always talked about, when blockchain came out, we have repeated conversations around when would blockchain be relevant to your business, when would be the right time to get on that wave, when would be the right time to bring that to be the leader in the industry who brings that to the market and to your customers. And you're not dealing with an easy set of customers, so they are not, the lawyers come and says that they are not the best at adopting technology. So you have managed to do that in a very difficult industry. How did you do it?
I think that's just timing, right? I think the answer is timing. Be willing and interested in the future, and be capable. And again, it's one of these things where you don't realize that you're capable of doing it until you realize you're one of the few people doing it, which is sitting there and somebody describes a new technology or something that you've just read about, and you think to yourself, oh, wouldn't that be really good if I used it in this way? Or if I added, data was one of the big things for us when we started to get access to big data and more records that were becoming digitized. And our first thought is, well, we can do amazing things with that data, because I know a whole bunch of people who need access to information, and suddenly this information is digital. So we can start building services and products off the back of this. And I know all the data isn't there yet, right? But I believe it will be at some point. So you start, in fact, we launched a business on the basis that data would one day be complete, and we would have a business that could access it and present it to the industry in a way that made it usable and interesting. And of course, the bigger the data set, the more complex the tools that you need. So of course, the next obvious advent is, as soon as you start learning about what machine learning and these language models are capable of doing, the obvious next step is to say, well, what if we put those into this data, and we could suddenly start making products.
This is a very interesting, like you're talking about it as if it comes to people naturally and to everybody naturally. It doesn't. So how do you connect? Because you're not a trained technologist. Like you didn't do, for example, software engineering or whatever in uni or in your business. So you're a trained engineer. Where do you go from hearing about the technology? What's the journey from hearing about the technology, coming across the technology, and then seeing how it could impact your business? Start seeing the use cases.
That's an interesting question, and I don't know how to answer it, because it's something that you just kind of do. I there's no process to work through. Stuff just pops in your head. So the moment people start talking about driverless cars, for example, and that sort of technology, I'm not interested in the fact that machines are going to be on the road. I'm thinking to myself, well, wouldn't that be awesome for old people who are isolated in villages and have no village shop and don't have a bus service, who could then suddenly be able to get to where they need to go to at any time they want? Or people who, the whole drink drive thing, right? You can now drive to the pub and the car will drive you home. it's seeing the real world kind of benefits ahead of the sort of the reasons to say no. I'm not a person that wants to go, oh, that sounds risky. Oh, I'm worried about how many people on the road will be killed by machines driving. I'm more worried about the number of people on the roads who are killed by people. Right? We generally are the problem.
That's
And
that's the optimist in you, isn't it? That's the
I think
optimist
so.
that looks for how positively things can.
And so I think that's what it is. It's the combination of being a huge optimist, and someone that you know that likes and is interested in technology and is always looking for, well, is there a better way of doing stuff? So you kind of take on all that information all the time. So in our particular world, you know, every time we come across a piece of data or a new piece of technology, you're always thinking, well, what can we do to change how we currently operate? And we need something that they can do today that doesn't change them too much.
And how do you do that? Because specifically, because you're operating in a market that is extremely conservative, because they're lawyers, and they're meant to be risk averse. They're trained to be risk averse. How do you? Because I know, for example, you've got AI products, and we get into. I want to talk. I want you to talk about what did you do with the ChatGPT and how you thought about the impact of that. But how do you get the customers to buy into?
I think the best way to describe our customers is if you were selling them a car, right, and they had never seen a car before, they're the kind of people that want to know exactly how it works. They want to know exactly how the engine, what fuel goes into it, how do the brakes function, what's the risk of driving it, how fast does it go, you know, and they want to get right down into understanding the detail. They're not interesting is, oh, there's something that get me from A to B faster. Their brain doesn't function that way. They get right into the you know, you need to tell me how that works. Even worse still, you need to tell me how much margin you're making on selling me that car. It's a whole different sort of process. So you have to be prepared in bringing those customers along with you to understand that interrogation. And it is like being in court. You're under a cross examination. And if you think about how they've been trained, and you know the education process they've been through, and then their experience on the job, it's adversarial, it's about interrogation, it's about, you know, putting in all of that work, and so you've got to be prepared to stand there and stand behind what you're presenting and know the answer to all those questions. They do not suffer fools lightly at all. You know, they're going to unpick all of that stuff. So the best way to then pitch to them is to kind of pick all of that stuff up at the beginning and say, right, here's the vision, here's what it could do for you, and here's how it works. Here's the source of the data.
If we slightly flip this subject and bring it internal with an internal view, Search Acumen has changed as a business dramatically in the past 10 years that I have been exposed to it. And how do you manage that change? How do you bring your team along the way, from the lens of technology, if you speak? So when we started, for example, introducing the AI concepts and the projects and how they were used to testing and rolling out normal software digital products, then you introduced the AI concepts and projects. So all of a sudden they need to start learning what to do with it, how to test it, how to come up with requirements for an AI project, and that kind of stuff. And from my point of view and my observation, what I never saw in your team was fear of, it's going to take my job, or what does it mean for me? What I always observed from different levels was the excitement of, how are we going to change the way we work? This is very exciting. How did you manage to create that?
Communication. You share everything, which I know is, again, with many businesses, that's a concept that's alien to a lot of leadership. But you literally have to share everything, including your own doubts and fears. Right? You have to demonstrate that you're as fallible as anybody else is in these circumstances. But what that, again, it comes back to the same word. It's that trust, isn't it? People will listen, they'll understand, they'll trust, because we've told them everything previously and we've always shared what's going on, and they understand the change, and then we allow two-way conversation, right? So it's about feedback as well. So people are allowed to ask questions or make suggestions or get involved in the projects, and experience them for themselves, and it becomes a culture where people embrace the opportunity to do something new, rather than, as you say, rather than fear, right? And I always think fear comes from a place of a lack of understanding or information. Fear, we fear the unknown. That's kind of, as a human, you're utterly wired up to see a dark cave and worry about what's in it, because you can't see it. Once you have information about what's in the cave, your brain changes, the way you changes, and that's carried through into modern society without us even understanding why it happens. If you don't understand something, you fear it because you don't know how to process it. And so you change people's understanding, and suddenly it's not about fear, it's about how can I use that for me? How does that make my job easier, or how does that make my life better? Or in our case, how do we grow? How do we use this to grow the company, get more customers, be more successful, and have more opportunity?
I think a lot of it is down to your understanding. Like, you couldn't communicate if you didn't understand what does it mean. And we, at the moment, I think one of the biggest challenges we have in the business is the leadership who don't understand it. They are not they rather delegate technology to somebody. If they have somebody in the board, a lot of the time it goes down to even like the IT manager, the whatever digital transformation head of digital transformation, even, rather than somebody strategic at the board level. And then I think we have gotten to the point that is not one person's job, not that people are not capable. It's just the complexity level is so much that is no longer one person can make the best decision. So it's a whole leadership needs to understand, needs to have a conversation about the implication, and have a conversation about different parts of the business, and how is it going to impact the whole business. Shall we go to the ChatGPT, the day we call it the day after ChatGPT? Like, how did you explain it to the team? What kind of conversations did you have with them? And then how did it change your strategy once we did we did a bit of playing with it and then decided what to do with it in the business? So talk to me about that.
Well, it's a technology actually that was very easy to communicate, because you just have to demonstrate it, right? You register on OpenAI, you pull up a 3.5 as it was, and then you ask it a question and you say, watch this, and people just sit there with their jaw dropping, and then all you have to do is then start talking about what else could you use that power for. And of course I get quite excited, so I'm thinking I'm going to show you this at some point. And we were talking about preparing, it might have been a press release, it might have been a sort of a document that we were going to circulate within our business, but we were talking about drafting and how we could get it right. And I just went, just put it in this. And they went, what do you mean? I said, well, look, describe this. And I think the phrase that I used for the team was, I asked GPT, tell me about search acumen. Just a really simple question. And it wrote this 300 word, which was near as damn it perfect. There's a few things that you tweak about what we were as a business, which it had simply drawn from the websites and stuff that's out there, and once you understand that, what's sitting behind it, it's not quite so magic. But to see that appear in front of people, they just suddenly went, well, that's going to make writing, pieces much easier. I'm going, and that's the point. One of our challenges is always, how much can we do in the time that we've got? So now all of a sudden, drafting is one of the things that takes the most time. If your first draft can be prepared, using a tool like this, how much more of those can you do? Suddenly you've, exponentially got a more powerful team. And that's just one tiny part of our business. Now let's think about, what if the customer service team, one of our biggest challenges for customer services is that all customers hate automated emails. They're horrible. They all look the same. They've come out of a machine.
But is it not the culture you created before? Because one of the AI projects that you have in the business, that you even started giving them names, and then
Yeah.
they went on your website as a part of the team, and they have their LinkedIn profile, and we make jokes about like, oh, they are more capable, you need to give them a pay raise because they are more capable AI, team member. So is it not, how much of it you think is, because I think that's a big part, you have embedded that harmony between, because I'm talking, I now go around and talk about like the harmony, like we are having embedded AI human teams. So we need to, as business leaders, we need to think about how do you run or create high performing AI human teams. But you have done it, a few years back, you have started doing that.
Yeah, and we did it with the teams in a way that brought them on board, because what we automated was the task that nobody likes doing. And this was the beauty of where AI can take us. And it's a massive subject, and we could be here for hours trying to talk about everything. But in very simple terms, you can take something that historically you couldn't have written an algorithm to do because it was just simply too complex, like, as we did, reading incoming emails, right? Every company worth their salt has written some algorithms that will find the subject line of the email or somebody's name in the email, and manage this kind of the flow. But what it's never been possible to do is context. Can I read the context of this email and choose an action in a very human way as to what we should do with it? And that kind of, and dealing with, as we get thousands of emails a day, was a very laborious task, right? We'd automated some of it. Out of office is great. You can get rid of those. It's easy. You know what they look like. But anything that actually needed to be read because it was from a customer asking a query or raising an issue or wanting to see an invoice, all of those things need to be dealt with by a person, until we built Robbie, right? And then all of a sudden, Robbie becomes your PA that's screening all of this information and saying, right, that's just a query, or that needs to go to customer services, or that's just a search result. I can sort that out and send it to the client. It's doing a task that historically you wouldn't have been able to automate, but nobody wants as a job, right? Nobody stays in that job for long. Whereas Robbie's going to be there, till we turn him off.
24/7.
Yeah, till we turn him off.
Yeah.
And so he becomes. I mean, we're calling him he. It is it's a welcome addition to the team.
Yeah.
And so therefore, he's not scary.
Mm.
And I think that's where, and not particularly for me, it depends on who I'm talking to about technology. You have to pitch that message at a level that doesn't scare people, because the big change is talking about machines driving cars. That's big, scary, horrible change that people can't get their heads around.
Yeah. And how much does it like, I kind of know the answer because I know you pretty well, I think, but how much, or does it, the at the pace at which is the AI is moving or developing, advancing, does it scare you? And if it does, in what ways?
Well, no, it doesn't, does it? I mean, it
kind of know the answer.
It can't happen fast enough for me.
Yeah.
So
if it doesn't scare you, does it excite you? Which I know the answer. What does it excite you about?
It absolutely does. But I think I do think we come back to the human issue, the people issue, right? There's never been a point in history where technology hasn't scared people. I mean, we refer to people like that as Luddites, right? There's a reason for that. There's an incident in history, where people smashed up machines because they feared what they were bringing. We were told that traveling over 25 miles an hour would make the human body disintegrate. We've always been afraid of change and what technology brings. But what history tells us time and time and time again is that technology will always win, always, because the benefits for society and for individuals eventually outweigh and overpower the initial fear. and there isn't a significant point at anywhere in history where that's been the case. Where suddenly we've said, actually no, let's not do that. Even in the areas of some of the medical research, it still goes on, even though we're not sure it's ethical, in inverted commas. It hasn't stopped entirely, and so it's we are just obsessed. There's enough people within the human race obsessed with seeing that change that it will just keep coming. I mean, there's whole books written on tipping points and early adopters and all of this sort of stuff that explain where these psyches are. Because we're wired that way. I mean, it's one of the reasons the species is successful.
Yeah. And hence I gather you don't agree with the group of people who are suggesting a pause, even a 6 months pause.
What for? What do you possibly hope to achieve in 6 months that will change the eventual outcome? And I think I understand why people fear ceding control of these things, but again, it's still a choice, right? It's still there are lots of things wrong with society, but my argument would always be that they're human driven. The problems we have are driven by human behavior, not machines and technology.
Yeah. I found it fascinating just to see the kind of people who have signed that letter just because they are involved in technology and they are international kind of business people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you gonna, let's assume hypothetically that we paused for 6 months, in which countries we would pause? Who can you convince to pause for 6 months?
So call me a cynic, but if you look at the people who are talking about that and you look at their current business models, right? What's their biggest fear? Somebody is going to overtake these organizations and create competing services or come up with distributed opportunities that are basically going to crap on their business models. And so a lot of this tends to be a business decision that we should pause. But in the same way that the smoking industry didn't want to do research into whether it caused cancer, or the petroleum industry didn't want to look at alternative fuels, we're seeing some big multi-billion companies who are thinking, wow, this technology would allow Joe Public or Joe Small Business to compete on a level footing with us, and we don't like it. So let's just see if we can find a way to lock them out.
And does that make you worry, or what do you see happening in your industry? If we go a bit futuristic, say in the next 3 years, what do you think is going to be the biggest changes in your sector as a result of AI?
I don't think the sector itself will change much at all. I think you will find an increasing occurrence of AI-driven products that are being utilized by law firms to enhance what they do. For example, a lot of law is data collection and analytics, right? If you've got to trawl through 1 million emails that a company have got, that's not a job that you want a person doing. Discovery is an area of the law that is ripe to say, let's have something read all of this stuff and we'll tell it the things that we're looking for and it will go and find them for us. So there'll be these changes that will occur. We've done similar things for property, where people are managing large portfolios of ownership. There are organizations that own tens of thousands of rental properties or shared ownership, and they're trying to manage these portfolios in a very antiquated system, that is land registry and registrations and charges, and the Land Registration Act itself is just coming up to being 100 years old. In 2025 it'll be 100, and so it's although it's had some modernization, you're working in an old framework, and so the ability to automate a lot of that legwork will eventually be adopted. But the legal process, that won't change. You'll still go through the same hoops. And this is quite interesting. One of the conversations we have with our clients is that they work in a time and expense world. So one of their fears will be, well, if everything takes less time, I won't be able to charge as much. And you're saying, but why are you trying to fit a new technology into an old charging mechanism? Why not charge different?
Yeah. The new
Why?
business models is a
and what's
outcome.
interesting is that actually, without what we're talking about, there's a lot of clients, particularly corporate, particularly local, government and local government, who are more and more increasingly asking law firms to work on a fixed price basis. They're putting out tenders for legal work, and they're actually being forced into having to function differently because they can't just charge time and expense on these big contracts. If you work for one of the big multinational corporates, they don't give you a blank checkbook when you're their lawyer.
Yeah.
They want to say, no, we'll retain your legal services for this fee a month, and we'll tender it out to the 5 biggest firms, and we'll see which one gives us the best price. Well, in that world, yes, you are interested in, can I be incredibly efficient? Because I'm not able to charge time and expense anymore.
Yeah.
And so we'll start to see 3 years might be too short a time gap to see major change, but you'll see a trend. You'll see that trend happening. If I was to roll out to, let's take it a decade further forward, it'll be completely different. You'll have robot lawyers who are doing the almost 90% of the casework, and the smart legal professions just doing the 10% that needs that human interaction. That I can see very clearly, but it won't change quickly.
And what would happen that would surprise you? Is there anything that you can think of that you don't see happening? Because we are having it's a lot of extreme predictions or I'm sure you've heard of all the articles that are coming in the mainstream media about godlike AI, and we're all going to be, it's going to be a matrix.
I feel like we've been here before, right? Every time something like this comes along, when we created nuclear weapons, right, and we had the Cold War in the 60s, the world was going to end, right? We live in a world where half the movies you watch on Netflix are about the apocalypse. We love an apocalypse story. We're obsessed with it. I prefer to live in a world where my future is Starfleet, right? Where everything that we built in terms of technology was used for benefit and good, and you don't need money, and everybody's fed, and machines are doing the things like the medicine and the, managing world hunger. And so, and humanity is free to explore what interests them, not what they're forced into doing to survive. I mean, we live on a planet where 2/3 of the world's population is still not even fed regularly, properly, right? So if a machine can solve that, that's better than we ever did. And I understand that I'm a complete optimist in these things. And are there bad people who will use these technologies for their own benefits? Yes, of course there are. There always are. That's the way we're wired up. But generally speaking, everything moves forward on the vast majority of people are better off.
I think we share the same position in this, so it's hard for me to disagree with what you're saying. And I think in the innovation room, I try to bring point of views that is not getting enough attention in the mainstream media, because the mainstream media, if you're listening to the normal social media, the news channels, the news media, everything is always negative and everything is always dramatically going to go wrong. So I try to bring
bad news sales. Turn on the 9 o'clock news and see how many good news stories there are. It'll be the last, maybe they just finished on the last thing that such and such has completed a marathon and raised some money, but the first 9 stories in front of it will be bad news, because bad news sells, and it's something about human nature. We're obsessed with that, where things have gone wrong. And it just it's and mainstream media have known that for centuries, not just decades. They've been writing books and newspaper articles ever since we came up with the printing press. But again, even if you look at pre-printing press storytelling, that it was all, there's always a bad guy, there's always something that's happening, there's all
it's the drama that drives.
There's no drama in good news, and it doesn't sell.
Cool. So if you want to finish off, how always we can talk for hours, so I'm conscious of the time. If you want to finish off with a piece of advice from an optimist to the business leaders who want to engage with AI and the new waves of AI advancement, what would you tell them as like the top 3 things or 2 things or however?
So I think the first phrase I'm going to throw out there is think big, start small. Right? Never be afraid to imagine what the possibilities are, but you have to start with something like we did with Robbie, and just dipping our toe in. In fact, if you think about the very first AI we built when we worked together, it was to cleanse addresses, something that's core to our business. All we wanted to do was turn rubbish data we got from our clients into real world address data that matched. And if you're a person who could read a spreadsheet, you could do it, but no machine could do it if it wasn't in the right column and it wasn't tagged correctly. And we solved that. Very simple. Start small, create something that works, find a market for it, and then build from there. Too many projects, and we saw it in the 2000s, too many IT projects go big. They get an idea, they go big, and inevitably collapse under the weight of what they're trying to achieve. So yes, it would be think big but start small.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Andrew, and I hope to have you back soon in a few months when you've made more advancement with the AI and come to talk to us about those.
Brilliant. Thanks, Somayeh. It's lovely to be here. Love to see you again.
Thanks for joining us in the Innovation Room.
We hope it sparks some ideas.
Want to learn more about what we do?
Maybe you could even be our next guest.
And spark some ideas yourself.
Find us at Geeks Limited.
And join us again soon.
Because real change never stops.